first of all, I think this seminar, and I have to compliment our chairman from Himalayan Tiger Foundation for having the vision to put this together. Has been an exciting day, learning about experiences locally, which is Nepal. And for everyone who's not from Nepal, welcome to Nepal. And also the experience in Netherlands and South Africa, and combination of different ideas has been certainly very enlightening. To that effect, I think what I would like to do is put everything in Nepali perspective, and perhaps South Africa, Netherlands, and other parts of the world, the practices and ideas that's floating around for national park management and all that, then could be, let's have a lively discussion. But since I'm given the responsibility of being the chairman, I'll try to control the conversation so it doesn't stray too much far, either right or the left. So with that, first of all, as a prime, I would like to bring up this issue about, in our presentation today, we saw a lot of tigers, we saw a lion, we heard the word top predator, flagship species, and all that. One discussion that we can float around is, when we are thinking about conservation, should we think from a flagship species and charismatic species perspective, or should we think from more of a ecosystem, more of a biodiversity, more of, lack of a better word, holistic approach to conservation? And I would like to kind of throw this question as a starter to our government representative, Dr. Maheshwar Dhakal.
Government of Nepal has started our conservation system through species conservations, means flagship species. As you go through the history, the rhino patrolling system in Chittagong, and even in the Tarai, most of the parks, they established focusing some iconic species. For example, Porsa is the elephant, Chittagong rhino tigers, and Bardia tigers, and Suklapata the swan deer, right? Nepal has already very strong experience on that, where we focus the flagship species. But it's a very good question, and two school of thoughts, whether you have a two choice, whether flagship species or ecosystem approach. But if you ask me personally or professionally or institutionally, definitely sometimes to raise the fund, to create the awareness or capacity building of the people, sometimes flagship species is very important. If you see the tiger photo over there, the people are very excited there. But they do not like, or they do not understand what is the ecosystem behind the flagship species, what is functioning in the ground. But as a government manager or conservationist or researchers, I think we have to focus on holistic approach. That's why two approaches have equal importance. But if you are talking about the long-term existence of that iconic species, I think we have to focus on ecosystem approach or holistic approach or integrated approach, whatever you say. But at the same time, to build the capacity of the local communities, the students, or awareness among the general audience, we have to pick up some flagship species and go through them in order to protect the whole systems.
And as a follow-up, the last presentation was profoundly pushing the envelope, so to speak, because in Nepal, that is not the practice that we currently have, and it certainly sounds very attractive. But going back to supply and demand perspective in that approach, do you think that having such kind of system will create demand for certain species more than the others in the South African context?
I will take it also to the previous question. In the private reserves, we have decided that we do the big five management. And the big five are lion, elephant, rhino, buffalo, and leopard. And the reason is very simple. We take the marketing first. And so that is what you can sell to the public. And the manager then must make sure that these big five can survive. And so the manager is responsible for the ecosystem approach. But the marketing and the ownership is really very much focused on the big five. Now, I told you before, the scientific advisors are working hand in hand with the executive powers. And it's the executives that must make sure that the ecosystem is not driven into a direction that is only big five. So he is or she is responsible for the biodiversity. But from the marketing, you start with the big five.
So going to more of a Dutch experience on this, you mentioned that from a 50 square kilometer reserve, you are raising about 6 million euro a year, which is fantastic. But in Dutch approach, do you think that there is some kind of focus in terms of what species to introduce and what not to introduce, or what species to focus, or is it rather more, visitor driven and not so much from the ecosystem?
Well, when you compare the Hoge Veluwe in a very populated and densely area to Bardia, where there are only 2,500 visitors a year, also because of the season. The season also plays a role in that. The winter it's not so good, and the wet season so we have to take that into account. No, the main driver is the ecosystem, and the ecosystem. We don't have obviously the flagship animals as much, although the red deer is a flagship animal to a certain degree, but it's mainly eco-driven with as much and as many diversified species. The people who are coming there are interested in nature in general, so they are, but they want to hear the story behind it. So they don't only want to observe and watch, but they want to see in exhibits, or they want to hear from the ranger either the historic stories or the current stories, and how it all fits together. That is really the main theme in the Netherlands, and I think that is.
I would like to kind of ask for a expert opinion from a couple of very old organizations, WWF and NTNC. What are their perspective into this conservation management, flagship versus the ecosystem?
Thank you, Dibesh. First of all, I'd like to second what Dr. Dakal said. There's a difference, because when you talk about the flagship species, it's basically NGO approach, because without the money, the conservation can't work. So with this flagship species, we're raising a lot of funds so that we can invest in our conservation effort. But whatever the initiative we are doing in the field is mostly the ecosystem based, because we are doing the habitat management in order to boost the population of this keystone species. So it's just a matter of, when you talk about the flagship versus the ecosystem based, it's just a matter of approach you are taking. For the conservation organization like NTNC, WWF, we need to raise the fund. So we are taking this keystone species as a flagship species, so that we can raise the awareness, we can generate the awareness among the masses, because the tiger, we take it as a, like whenever a people is called, hey you tiger, it's mostly because we are creating awareness inside you as well. So we are trying to grasp that information and raise the funds. But our working approach is mostly the ecosystem based. Thank you.
Yeah, I think, I'm also, as NTNC, we have working for many, 20, 30, 25 years, more than 25 years. We also have a similar approach, like Dr. Konson already mentioned. For raising funds, we need flagship, but we are also focusing on other species. And as we are more focused towards the research and monitoring activities, while doing that, we also try to build a database on the other species, not only the tiger, rhino, and other flagship. Thank you.
So to wrap this with a flagship or ecosystem approach, I would like to ask Dr. Zak, what is his expert opinion on this?
Well, I think that by now we have heard most people saying that there is in fact not a contrast between the two approaches, that they are the same in a way that if you have, and I'm going to introduce a new term that we haven't heard here, an umbrella species instead of a flagship species, you protect the umbrella species, it provides the umbrella to protect the whole ecosystem. And because the umbrella species can only live in a healthy ecosystem, you have also immediately the obligation to do the whole system. So one is how do I sell it, and the other thing is as soon as you come to real management of nature, then it's the ecosystem.
Now I open the floor for any questions on this particular topic.
Mr. Chairman, you are a very wise man. Can you answer the next question? Is Nepal ready for the South African approach?
So before we go into that topic, I think there are a few challenges that we need to look into and analyze in a very brief manner here. And then at the end, we can summarize whether Nepal is ready or not. So if we don't have any other question, I would like to go into a next topic, which is a big one for conservation, which is wildlife crime. And I would like to acknowledge DSP Sabine Pradhan, who did a commendable job of nabbing the serial killer of rhinos. A big compliment and for the a big round of applause. All right, so that's a good segue into the biggest challenge, one of the biggest challenges of conservation in Nepal and everywhere else, which is poaching. Which approach would, or which system would help us either mitigate or completely eliminate poaching? Now, to give a little bit of a backdrop, while we saw a really wonderful 18 million wildlife being, protected in all these private reserves, it is also a known fact that South Africa has the most rhino poaching in the world.
I will react.
Okay, so I'll let you react to it, and then also kind of shed some light in terms of poaching in that arena.
There are two things to realize that. The number of rhinos in South Africa is much higher than anywhere else in Africa. How come it is much higher? Because it was the white rhino was nearly extinct in the whole of the world. It was bred back in Natal National Parks or Natal Provincial Parks. Then it became privatized, and so the Parks Board is providing rhinos to many owners. And it means that the total number of rhinos in South Africa has ballooned. And so if you're saying that the poaching is worse there, that is absolutely true. The question is, how many % of your rhinos are being poached? Now what very few people are realizing at this moment, yes, the poaching is very bad in South Africa, but it's still not as bad, or not as good, or whatever you would like to express it, not equal to the number of baby rhinos that are being born. So the rhino population of South Africa is still on the increase. Yeah? And so that after an enormous conservation effort where that white rhino was taken from the brink of extinction. Now the second thing you have to realize is that yes, the poaching is bad. The poaching in South Africa in total is much less bad than it's in Tanzania. The total number of elephants that were poached in the last 5 years in Tanzania has been close to 200,000 elephants. 200,000 elephants, yeah? And and that came back, the poaching was under control till approximately 6 or 7 years ago, and then it came back. Now, one of the things that you can never answer is whether in South Africa or in Tanzania or Kenya, the army is good or the army is bad. What we're seeing in Kruger National Park, it's a long park, it's about 350 kilometers long, along the border with Mozambique. The army has moved in approximately three and a half years ago to stem the poaching of the rhinos. We do not see a change in the rhino poaching at all, except that it's still increasing. Richard Leakey has now gone to the president of Kenya to ask for the abolishment of the Kenya Wildlife Service because of the poaching is not under control, and his estimate is that 30% of the poaching is actually done by Kenya Wildlife Service. Yeah? So the answer is not privatize or not. The answer in this case is, your law enforcement is a very complicated thing, and the amount of money that is involved can nearly corrupt anyone else, whether he's in the army or whether he's private. We had to arrest a number of private veterinarians in South Africa because they were using their skills of killing rhinos. Yeah. So I think the question should be is, how can you make sure that poaching is kept under control at these incredible prices that are being paid by the Chinese and by the Vietnamese and by the Taiwanese at this moment for rhino horn? That is the issue. And I think it is not about privatizing or not privatizing.
Very good. And certainly Nepal can basically be very proud because we had 0%. So 0%. Now I would like to have our government representative highlight the effort a little bit in a very brief way. And what do you think if we ever adopt a system like South Africa, whether we have the internal capacity, what he mentioned was law enforcement and all that, to deal with private system?
Law enforcement with private. Yeah. Okay, let me go through some historical system of Nepal, because we had an experience of around 40 years of the panchayat regimes, the unilateral single party system. Right? Still, the present government, most of the senior high officials, they are coming from the unilateral government systems, and at that times, everything's the philosophy was government does everything, or government knows everything. That was the philosophy in the single party system. But later, last 20-25 years, we entered into the democratic era. Even sometimes people used to say so-called democratic era, because sometimes some of the political parties, what they are saying or what they said, that is democratic. What other opposition parties said, it is autocratic. This is the definition sometimes. But here in the government, including private sector in law enforcement, I think at this moment it's very difficult to say yes, but it is. But another point is, impossible is nothing. But law enforcement, from my perspective, is a social problem. It is not a technical problem. Just Mr. Dibesh and concerns do the laboratory test and DNA, and this is that species, or it is that is one, or it is different one. But in social science, you cannot say the answer in single point, and every times you have to find the solution in a common point, and it takes long times. That's why exactly I do not know the Africa what exactly they are doing, just based on the listening these presentations. It is possible, but it takes time, and we need a rigorous discussions from field to center. Just as you remember in my presentations, how did we can succeed to make our law enforcement more stronger and stronger? Because we established the various level of institutional reform from community level, district level, and central executive level, and the minister level, and the prime minister apex body, the executive prime minister level. We got that level of support from various level of supports. That's why it is possible, not at this moment. We need a very rigorous discussion based on science, including social science, biological science. We need a discussion.
I open the floor to both the panelists as well as the audience. If you have any questions regarding this particular issue or related issue, you may do so, or if you have a feedback here or a comment, you can certainly add to it.
Just to add what the Dibesh opening statement was, I'm not commenting anything. So government of Nepal recently held a symposium towards zero poaching in Nepal. So we celebrated zero poaching over the last 2 years. So it's a concentrated effort of every stakeholders, like all the way from the ground level, at the park level, at the national level, at the regional level as well. So it's a concentrated effort that we were able to celebrate zero poaching. So everybody has an equal stake in it, and we NGO are supporting the government initiatives, trying to maintain this zero poaching in the year to come. Yeah, thank you.
If we don't have any questions, there is a hand. Okay.
Yeah, thank you very much for sharing the experience in South Africa. And as we were having this international operation called Cobra, most of you have heard about it. And the international operation was organized to make sure that the products from one continent does not travel to another continent. And we had participants from China, also from Vietnam. These are the two countries whom the finger is pointed at. So one of the major question, or the important question, was, what if China did not take any wildlife parts? Wouldn't that help curb poaching and illegal trade altogether? So the Chinese participant that was there amongst us, he stood up and replied and said that it's been over 300 years of practice in China where consumption of wildlife is practiced during different festivities and during different traditional rituals and all that stuff. And now China is involved for over 30 years in terms of anti-poaching and stopping illegal trade. Okay. So he was referring to the fact that you cannot altogether eliminate the practice that has been there for such a long time within a very short span of time. That was one aspect. And he also then raised a question saying, what if the supplying countries would stop the supply of animals or the wildlife products? So I think the best answer to the question is stop poaching. You have zero poaching. You don't have to blame the country that has a demand. And nobody is going to point a finger at you because you are a supply country. So I think the best example that we can show to the rest of the world and what the rest of the countries can take is, let's start having zero poaching not only in one country, not only in one region, but in the whole world. I know this is, I don't know how much possible it is, but I think the best practice that we can take is the culture of zero poaching.
I'm Birendra Bastola from Japa, Eastern Nepal. My question is, well, Nepal, which is an adjoining district with West Bengal, where every day tigers don't have to get the visa to travel. So every day people are being attacked by them and killed. Tigers are protected by the government, but the people are victims of tigers getting nothing. What do you say about it? When do you think the day comes to the people can sleep sound and safe? Thank you.
Basically sold my, next topic, which was human-wildlife conflict. So that's a really good segue into that topic as well. So I think Maheshwar is the best person.
I think not only the tiger, people are suffering from other iconic or flagship or umbrella species, whatever. Especially you are from the Japa, and Japa people are mostly suffering from the elephant, not from the tiger. But whatever species, it does not matter. But the question is how the people are how people are facing the problem and they getting the some relief or compensation fund. But as I mentioned in my presentation also, the government in Nepal is very serious towards the people's feelings that how they are suffering, and 24 hours or 365 days. One point, I always, even the present ministers, many times I explain him that, sir, the human-wildlife conflict, you mean the people, tiger kill the people, right? You cannot predict time and you cannot predict the place, site, wherever and whenever. That's why we need some sort of basket money somewhere here in national level or district level that immediately government can respond wherever the incident occurred. That's why our government is very serious. And if you compare to Indian government, for example, the Mahananda Tiger Reserve, just nearby the Chapa districts, if you ask to the government authority of India how much money you provide if the animal kill the peoples, definitely you will get the answer 100,000 Indian currency, equivalent to 160,000 Nepalese rupees. Whereas Nepalese government has already 300,000. But we have to be clear that we cannot compare the money and the life of the people. We have to be very serious on that. And recently, the National Tiger Conservation Committee, which was chaired under the chairmanship of the Honorable Prime Minister, right, Honorable Prime Ministers, and we decided to increase the amount. But how much? It is under discussions. And hopefully, the government of Nepal will increase the types of animals and the amount of relief, and we will try to make a good relations between the peoples, and let's do our best. And another my request is, you know, the country like Nepal, mountainous country, and we are very proud and pride on our own species, but at the same time, many people, if you see in Kathmandu, people are suffering from the monkey, and if you see their situation is very serious. That's why conservation is very complex one, vague one, and it takes long time, and it requires always good expertise and good money. That's why our request always to the general audience and all government and non-government partners, let's do together and support as much as possible we can.
My role is kind of diminishing here.
It depends very much in which country you are. You know, Africa has 53 countries. So in Kenya, it is the same situation as what you're describing here in Nepal. And that means that the people are very unhappy because the normal amount of time that is needed for solving a case like this in Kenya takes close to 3 years. And in the meantime, devaluation of the money is taking place, inflation is taking place, the people are not taken care of, and so that is not a very healthy system. If you're going to southern Africa, Zimbabwe or Tanzania, Zimbabwe or South Africa or Namibia, they take a different approach. When it is that someone is being killed, then the government steps in, but especially with crop damage, and much more crop damage is taking place than the number of people that are being killed. What you dare do, for example, with an elephant, you make it a trophy animal. And so the animal that is going into a village territory is then literally for sale for a trophy hunter coming out of Russia or Mexico or whatever. And many of these animals are put online immediately, literally within a couple of hours. At the moment where there's a damage report coming, the damage reports are done to professional hunters. The professional hunters have the access to the international market, and the animal is very often put on auction immediately. Now people are willing to pay not as much as the normal amount for an animal that is being shot like that, because they're in the middle of a business meeting, then have to jump into the airplane and start shooting. But nevertheless, that amount of money is then more than enough to compensate the crop damage. So that is a system where it is being privatized again. Again, you cannot do that very well when it's about people that have been killed, but for crop damage you can set up systems like that. But the only condition you need is that the animal can be sold for a trophy animal. And so that can be done with a lion that is doing crop damage, killing cattle. You can do it with elephants or whatever. And the people are satisfied because they see instantaneous, or within a week, they see the compensation taking place. Yeah, but so when it's life of people, then it's always the government that is being involved, because that is a much more complicated issue than crop damages or livestock damage.
All right, I think I have one last a round of topic as a food for thought. You know, when you were presenting your work in South Africa, the system in South Africa, I couldn't stop but thinking about Chiton National Park and how we have the core area and then the buffer area, and around the buffer area we have the settlements. Now, you know, we talk about, you know, Kanchan talked about the patchy areas, the corridors, and how they're not interconnected, how Chitwan tiger population is not, well, will have difficulty connecting to the Suklapanta Wildlife Reserve. If you, and here's a food for thought, and the possibility, perhaps, for Nepal, if you privatize or work in a public-private partnership mechanism on those corridors, where oftentimes what happens, you know, when state wants to take a piece of land, there's always this long argument, especially in Nepal. We have been very democratized the last revolution, so everyone wants something at any given time. If we find a way to privatize it, set up a system, an incentive in place, where we can possibly design or carve out the corridor linkages, would that be a good idea?
So I was just wondering if that would be possible at all, because Herbert showed us an example where all these private parks are on marginal agricultural country. And what you see in the Terai is that it's all prime agricultural country where you can grow rice. So what you should have to do then, in my opinion, is own more with your so-called corridor or wildlife reserve, then you would get revenues from growing rice, and that could be a problem. So maybe somebody else can react to that.
Kruger National Park is a park that was established in 1874. It is one of these flagship parks in Africa. And as you know, also South Africa went through the transition of a white-dominated government to a black government. And many people in South Africa were allowed, completely justifiably so, to point out to the government that much of their land had been stolen by white farmers before. And so there was a Truth and Reconciliation Commission, but then also a Land Claims Commission. And more than a third of National Park, Kruger National Park, was found to be illegally taken by the government. And so that whole area was given back to the people. But the government said, you know, we want one thing going, and that is to keep our biodiversity claims and everything. So we prefer that you keep it as a national park, but it's now leased from the people. And so the lease means very simple, that a third of that area is owned by the black people again. They are living as poor communities, but they get 30% of the income from that area. And modern hotels are being built there, but it's managed by private companies. But the idea there is that you should not steal from people. Yeah, that is the basic assumption. And we see that in other parts of Africa as well. WWF, for example, is working together with governments and with local communities to run these sort of properties. And then you can start making money of it. And so that is, I think, a part of the answer. Look at the economics and the finances and make sure that poor people are not paying the price for what you're doing to protect the tiger.
And just as a segue to that, Nepal is also known as the leader in community forest. How does that translate into more of a giving it to the community, not, so to speak, privatizing it, but giving it to the community so that they have a sustainable livelihood out of it?
Let me talk about one point about the privatization possibility and what Nepal experienced last 20, 30 years. If you see the Chiton, you know, if you are familiar with Chiton, there were 7 private hotels inside the port area, and we have some sort of positives and some sort of negative experience in the past. That's why when we are talking about the possibility, I think we have to analyze our past, what we achieved and what we learned. This is the one point. And the second one is, I think at the same times, privatization and private sectors is directly correlated to the economic growth and sustainability of the totality of the country. And what the government of Nepal applied, the liberalization policy in 1990s, and what achievement we did, and what lesson we learned, that is also another part, and we have to discuss on that, because the seeing the one particular area to private sector is not a just take and give, but there are so many factors, nexus, you can see over there. But let me focus on your questions about the community forestry, right? Community forestry, do you know, I think most of the social scientists and researchers, if you have heard about or read the articles written by the Elinor Ostrom, the Nobel laureate, 2009, she expired, but I read a lot of her articles, then I like very much. Because common property and public property, is it yours and it is government's property, local community's property, is the government properties. For example, if you grow a single tree or flower, for example these flowers, it is my own table, but from this beauty or flavor or smells, I am not only benefiting. I mean the flower of my kitchen gardens, my neighbor is also equally benefited. But whatever timber or firewood or any fruits it produces, that is mine. My point is, forestry or wildlife is a common property. It produces different types of goods by economics. Private goods, nature of private goods, and nature of common goods or public goods, even sometimes toll goods. That's why we have to take this management of the common property is not a very easier job, but sometimes very easier if you understand the total component of the society. And regarding to the community forestry, in our case, as I am also forester and working in the government, before 1970s, even a single piece of firewood, which is very, very basics to cook your foods, to get your energy, to your stops in the evening and mornings, you have to ask the government officer, sir, can I get this firewood? That was the policy. But at that time, our seniors, they thought it is too rude, it is not practical, because people who are living nearby the forest is related to them. And let's make whatever forest goods and services produce, let transfer some sort of ownerships to them, and they can get the benefits, or in principally how to increase the access of local communities and ensure the equitable or sustainable benefit sharing mechanism among them. And government of Nepal is decided to hand over the forest and also hand over the authority or power to harvest the forest, to collect the forest products and share among the households who are living in and around the forest. But at the same time, the ownership of the land remained in the government control. That is the fundamental difference. Sometimes even some of the people in Nepal, they are talking with us. Even if you hand over the ownership of the land, the management of the community forestry will give the more synergistic benefits. But it's the discussion under now. But here in most prominent and important realization is that the people who are living nearby the forest is belong to them. This is the realized by the government from the principle of devolutions or deconcentration or decentralizations, whatever you can say. People can identify the local communities who are belongs to that particular forest. They will decide by themselves. And how much forest is annually allowed to cut? It is supported by the government staffs, and the skilled and non-skilled laborers, they hired by the local communities by themselves, and they gather the all forest products in a common place, and they count the households who are interested to collect that particular forest products. For example, if my house have liquid gas, I do not need the firewood, then I will not claim. But my neighbors, they are cooking their food by firewood, they will claim, and they are fixing some sort of price, and they pay the money. But at the same time, I did my PhD research in community forestry. My argument is decentralization is very important, and three components in decentralizations: willingness of the government to give the resources to the local communities, this is fundamental, and second one is construction of local institutions, for example community forest user groups, we have very good, but third question is whether the local communities have sufficient capacity to take the decision or not. At this moment, government has very strong willingness and the local community, the local institutions are there, but unfortunately, most of the community forests, they do not have the capacity to fix the appropriate price of the common property resources. And now they are losing large chunk of the money on the name of community forest management. This is the one question where we have to discuss if you are talking about the prosperity of the forestry or involving of the private sectors, because always the price and market channel analysis and the prosperity is directly related to the private sector. But anyway, at this moment, we are pretty proud and we are very strongly claiming that community forestry of Nepal is very advanced one, and the local people are highly satisfied, and they are doing their best in close coordination with our government authority.
To add with what my sister said, I think at the beginning, and most of the community forests still think that forest is their property, and wildlife within forest, they really care. But in case of some areas like the adjacent areas of Chittagong National Park and some in Bardia, now they are seeing wildlife as one of their resources, and they are capitalizing it, and they are getting a lot of benefit. We can see the example from Bagmara Community Forest, which is in buffer zone of Chittagong, which is getting a lot of money from ecotourism, not from the selling trees, but selling the value of the wildlife, or just allowing tourists to go inside there. And there is some part on the northern side of Chittagong, which is outside of the buffer zone, Gyaneshwar forest area. They are also very willing to get tourists, and they are building tourist infrastructure. They are not focusing only on the forestry but also wildlife conservation. So I think that shows that if they get some incentives, or they see that we can get some benefits from the wildlife within our community forest, or we can make some value of that, then they always will be willing to bring wildlife in their community forest. I think that is very important. And related to corridors and this connectivity, I think maybe we also need a clear policy so that these areas kept as forest, and then these forests can be gone under different management. Maybe even Nepal has this different private forestry policy, and also this leasehold forestry provision, on which any tourism industry or others can take forest land as lease and then develop it as a tourism facility, or other forestry industry. So there are possibilities from existing policy also, but land use policy is what I think lacking in our place. If we have proper land use policy, and we can maintain certain areas should kept as forest, then maybe there's many opportunities like private forest, leasehold forest, or even the wildlife farming policy is there in place. So this can help on even establishing some kind of game parks in Nepal from existing policy. Thank you.
Is that if you want to go for a tourist market, that is the thing that we have discovered in Africa. You ask the specialist to be the hotel operator. So you're not letting that be done by local people who do not understand the market, say, of the new Chinese bourgeois or the American market or whatever. And so the trick the whole time is that you make a joint venture where the ownership of the land remains with the community, but where the exploitation of the reserve or the exploitation of the hotel is done by the people that can really add that value for the local people. And that is the secret of some of the absolute top hotels in Africa. They are owned by local people, but they're not managed by the local people. And I think that is a lesson you must learn, that management of tourism or management of wildlife should be done by specialists. But I think that the money should accrue to the people that own it. That's what I think.
Seeing the experience of Chitwan, because it's so much unregulated the tourism is, tourism businesses. So my personal view is there are a lot of land located outside the protected areas. Let's focus on that one.
We have stirred a very healthy and live discussion. We have a question. Okay, go ahead.
I have a long association with conservation as well as hunting. I shot my first tiger when I was 9 years old, all right? And the Chittagong, I have been there since I was 6-7 years old. The observation is, you know, the people versus animal or conservation or private or public. It is a joint thing. It has to be looked at it in a holistic way. And one leads to the other. For instance, we are very happy now. I have been to our national parks. There is definitely a growth of both the forest as well as the animal. But we are a small country. Unless we can grow their habitation, you are bound to have problems because there is no eco-balance there. And that is where the animal and the people come into conflict. But this is easily said than done. But as we just heard, the corridor concept is one. But a corridor concept, Nepal alone, I don't think you will be able to do that. It has to be done with the India. And I have been to some of the national parks in India now. Their growth of animals and ecosystem is as good as ours. The poaching is more, but as he rightly said, poaching becomes more if you have too many animals. If I have two, we can protect it very well because there is no possibility, particularly with the army backing, you could do that. So these are all problems, but in today's world, the people's proclivities towards nature, in which the wildlife and the forestry comes in, gives us a lot of hope. And the other problem you mentioned is, it is not, you should allow commercial activity like hotels and everything, but we have a tendency, you know, there is one spot which becomes popular and everyone goes to it. It's overpopulated, and then you have problems. On this, I think we should follow South Africa, and we should also follow closer to our neighbor is Bhutan. You can build in Bhutan, even a 5-star property, even around cities. But for a 10 miles radius, you cannot put up another one. So that nature remains as it is. It's not overused. And having said that, I will also say that it is the hunters who become the naturalists. Their self-interest. Now we are talking, now why not allow shooting? If you have too much, rather than, you know, getting out of control, you charge them and put the money back. We talked of where to get resource. That's one way of getting the resource. So if you combine, Nepal has had a lot of experience in this. And I see all three of you here, young people. You are very well informed and very well educated on that field. But then you need, at the end of the day, the impulse must come from government. Right? And before I end, since we have, Cash has brought you gentlemen from Holland, and we Nepalese sometimes have very short memory. It was the late Prince Bernhard of the Netherlands, when he was president of the WWF International, who convinced Nepalese leadership to bring the Trust Act by Parliament. And his contribution is immense. Even after he retired from the WWF presidency, he visited Nepal thrice, purely for conservation, because he felt Nepal had it in the Indian subcontinent, which could become an example. And I think we should recognize that today. Thank you.
Baburam, you talked about Chittagong, Karmacharya, you're working in Chittagong. What is your personal feeling now, what the developments are there? Because I have the impression, I've not been there recently, last year, but there are too many hotels built in a too small surface, and it is overexploited. And now we know the Chowdhury Group is building big things, and other rich people are building big things. What is going on there? And my second question is, if that is the case, how to avoid the same mistakes in Bardia, for instance?
Yeah, very relevant question and concern. Also, he said a little bit about that. Yeah, the tourism development is going haphazardly in Sauraha, and actually that is affecting the experience of the tourists, and that is already affecting the number of tourists coming. And I can see just I have not seen the exact statistics, but we have small wildlife displays in that's some sort of museum, and visitors in that museum, like 13% of tourists visit that museum, and visitors has gone down this year compared to past years. So we had never experienced that before. We had always growing, but suddenly the time comes somewhere here that it seems like the number of tourists visiting that area is coming down. So we need to analyze through the data that the park entry and others, whatever we have the tourist information. But it seems that people coming at particular to the Saura area is decreasing, especially the foreigners. We have seen very decrease this year, and new areas in other parts like Khasara and Nawalparasi area are getting more tourists nowadays. And there were all the tourist services were located in Saura, or it was centralized there. Now that is going to other areas also, and the other areas are also coming. So I think the experience that tourists used to get in the past, they are not no more getting that, and maybe they are shifting to the other areas themselves. But that takes a long time. That is another channel. Maybe we need to plan that before that happens. Like as you rightly said, in Bardia we have not that much crowd, but it's going on that line. So maybe we need to diversify the areas or in the products also. Like they can have different experience if they go to different places, and that will actually increase the number of visits of the tourists also. If they come one time, they stay in one place, they get one type of experience, and then they go the next time they come, they visit the other part of the park, and they get different kind of experience. So maybe we need to think on that line. So maybe the park authority or the buffer zone management council, that is buffer zone, we should work together with them, and then also give our expert advice from our experience from other places, and also convince them that we should go on that way before tourists feel that the tourism experience is deteriorated. Maybe we need to plan beforehand. That will be very useful.
One organization called WEPA, that is Walking Elephant Program of Asia, and we had done a survey on tourists, like why there is such lack of interest among them, because tourists are more concerned like how animals are treated there, like elephant riding or the other sports or adventures that are related with elephants are more common in Chitwan National Park. But what tourists feel is that the way elephants are treated is not that good way. So they are being more reluctant in enjoying those kind of adventures, maybe because that is one of the reason why the people are decreasing there. So I think more animal friendly or elephant friendly techniques should be developed, as it has been done in NTNC along with Elephant Breeding Center these days. So that would, I think, help in attracting more tourists in the coming days.
It's not a comment, just to complement what you have said. WLS still have a principal honored scholarship where we facilitate the people working on wildlife conservation, biodiversity conservation. And just to add to the tourism thing, Dr. Dhakal has recently one paper published where the people have more willingness to pay if they want to come in to see the park. So if you somehow can manage this unregulated tourism, so I think we have a future for that as well. Thank you.
Let me clear one point. Recently in tourism management, I think the peer review journal article we published together with my colleagues. Nowadays, what I think, in the last 2009 when I complete my PhD and I joined this department, And at that time, the government asked me to revise the revenue rate, which is the main source of income, the tourist entry fee. And at that time, when I go through the all literatures and documents, and I use the media personals, and I compare other countries, and at that time, this very basic principle that we found that the out entry fee was very low. If you see in 2010, what we collected, 13 crore, it means 13 means 120.
$1.3 million.
$1.3 million, yes. But just last year in 2014, we reached 520 million. It drastically increased now. Now what I am thinking, park entry fees should be a management tool of tourists, not just collecting the revenue or something like that. I am thinking too many ideas, they are roaming in my mind, but in the future if I get the opportunity to revise the policy, that I will use. But your question is very interesting. And why only the people visit to Saura? And it's focusing because last 1996, when I was the ranger in Chitwan National Park, I saw 32 rhinos, the Icharni area nearby the Saura. But now I could not see a single rhino. Maybe one of the reason behind the shifting rhino habitat is over-tourism.
Yeah.
This one. There are many reasons, but just single one. That's why my suggestion is, let's promote young generations and researchers to find out the underlying causes, that in the future the government can design the good policy. But regarding to the construction of the different types of hotels and very rapid constructions, it is very serious. But if you ask me personally, I think this is the very immediate outcome of political instability. Because everybody wants to earn the money as much as possible overnight, because there is no local government and central government is very weak. Let's hope our constitution will come in time and the local election will be held. Hopefully things will come under the normal framework. Thank you.
On that brighter note, I mean, if everyone is willing to stay 3 more hours here, we can continue the discussion. But if someone is really interested in the hostess fine wine and whiskey, we should head out. So with that remark, I would like to conclude this discussion, and we certainly generated a lot of interest and interesting topics. We certainly explored different way of looking at conservation, and there is no silver bullet was the overlining conclusion. 2 different places, 2 different setups, 2 different environments. So with that remark, we hope to continue this discussion and collaboration and cooperation. We would certainly like to know how they generate $6 million from 50 square kilometers versus our $5 million from 1,000 square kilometers. And that is something that we need to ponder a little bit more. So with that, I thank you for your participation, and I thank all the panelists here. Have a lovely evening.
Dibesh, stay seated for a sec. We must, on behalf of the board and the sponsors of the Himalayan Tiger Foundation, thank you very much for your input. It was a very good discussion, I think, a lot of topics raised. And in fact, after this afternoon, we have more questions and answers. That's always in science like that. Yeah. That's good. So we take the opportunity to thank you in person, Kanchan, on WWF. I'm very happy that you're here. We know each other. Baburam, NTNC. Maheshwar disappeared already. He's a busy man. He's a busy man. Government of Nepal. And then Frank, Dutch, head of Dutch. You are half American, half Nepalese. You understand both parts. And Jacques, thank you very much. And now it is time to contemplate a little white wine, red wine, or whatever. No whiskey. We have no money for whiskey. And then continue the discussion as friends and see the possible opportunity for the future. Thank you. Applause.